If you can introduce yourself in the chat and just take a second to familiar yourself with Teams. The default is that your mic is going to be muted, but we encourage you all to keep your cameras on. And then for questions, if you can put it in the chat. And then during the Q&A sessions, we can, if you want, you could also use the raise hand function, and we can turn your mic on if you have want to ask a question that way. And yeah, I think we'll go ahead and get going. So, see, the recording has already started. Excellent. So welcome everybody to the Golden Dome Book Award Conference. My name is Jonathan Clark, and I'm the Youth Services Consultant at the Vermont Department of Libraries. And I'm happy to be here with you today, along with author Stuart Gibbs, who's going to be presenting, and the Golden Dome Book Award Committee, which is awesome. And if you are, we also, we have Lily Talbert and Josh Muse from the Department of Libraries also are helping us out today. And so if you're having any tech issues, let us know and we'll do our best to resolve them. And we know that some folks will still be coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get going. So we're going to have our keynote presentation with Stuart Gibbs from 12 to 1, and then the committee will present from 1 to 2. So without further ado, Stuart Gibbs is the author of 5 best-selling middle grade series: Spy School, Fun Jungle, Charlie Thorne, Moonbase, Alpha, and The Last Musketeer. He also writes for TV and film. His book Charlie Thorne and the Last Equation won the 2021 Vermont Golden Dome Book Award, and his book Belly Up was a nominee in 2013. Stuart Gibbs, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm going to say it's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm pretty sure that nomination for Belly Up in 2013 was the first time any Belly Up was my first book. That was the first nomination it ever got for a state award, and at the time I was just starting out in this business, and I was realizing I could track sales on Amazon, and all of a sudden my sales in Vermont just exploded, and I didn't know what was
awesome
going
to hear.
And I was like, what happened? I didn't even know states had book awards at that point, and it took me like a week to try and figure out like what. And then I lost to Smile by Brandon Telgemeier, which I still am livid at her for. No. It's a thrill to finally, after all these years, get to talk to you. So thank you so much for even the nominations at all, and the award is just amazing. So I'm gonna do a little presentation here, which means I've mastered sharing my screen. What I was gonna do is a version of the presentation I would do at schools where I like to talk about the inspiration for the various series I do. Because I like talking about this, not just because it's probably the most popular question I get. Why do I write the series I do? But I think that not even just kids, but even sometimes adults a lot of the time have this misconception about how authors work, and with this idea that maybe we all just get these ideas just like bolts of lightning out of the blue and just know that story from start to finish. And I've just found that in talking to other authors, and certainly the case with myself, is just the sheer amount of time and energy and thought we put into an idea before we ever sit down and start, like the physical activity of typing that idea is often really surprising to people, especially when I tell, like elementary school students that several of my ideas are older than they are. So some of these ideas, I'm going to talk about 3 of them today, and most of them had a pretty long gestation period. So I will start sharing my screen here. So there, you can all see this, yeah. So there's the book you nominated, or the one. So thank you so much. But I would like to. I'll talk about the sort of my 3 current big chapter book series today. Starting with the Fun Jungle series. There's Belly Up, and this is a series about. You may all be very familiar with these, but I'll just give you a quick rundown about it. a kid who solves mysteries in a giant sort of theme park / zoo called Fun Jungle. All these animals always have something. All these mysteries always have something to do with animals and the environment. There's the Charlie Thorne series where Charlie Thorne is the smartest person on Earth and has been recruited against her will to track down things that the greatest scientists and thinkers from throughout history have discovered, but hidden away to protect them from the rest of humanity. And there's the Spy School series about a kid who gets recruited to the CIA's top secret academy of espionage and gets thrust into a world full of danger and action and intrigue, and manages to persevere and save the day. And what are, for the time being, 10 books. There will be 11 books as of next Tuesday, and 2 graphic novels at this point. So, where did these ideas come from? I like to always start with the Fun Jungle series, since this was my first series, and I like to point out that I have really wanted to be an author my entire life, and so I've been thinking about ideas throughout my entire life. But as proof that I've wanted to be an author, this is a form I was given when I was in 2nd grade. It was a horribly outdated form. Every once in a while I encounter a teacher or librarian who's given this form themselves. I like to put it up just to show how much times have changed, that they actually divided the jobs into boys' jobs and girls' jobs, and then gave the girls these 6, I can't even say jobs really, because they put mother in there for girls, but they put mother, nurse, school teacher, airline hostess, model, and secretary, which I found most girls these days are justifiably horrified when they see this. Not to say that any one of those is a bad option, but a pretty sexist series of jobs. But then I like to point out to the boys that they gave us some pretty weird options too. I grew up in Texas. Not a single one of my friends became a cowboy, but there it is, one of our 6 options we got. But I put author down there. And in 2nd grade, and so I really loved writing. I always wanted to be an author, but I did not know how anybody became an author, and I really got all the way to college without knowing if that was really even a viable job. I thought maybe most authors just were cowboys and wrote books on the side or something like that. So I decided to study what I like second most in after writing, which was animals, and I studied field biology in college. I went to a good university, but in a large city where there were not really any wild animals to study. So we would do our research at the zoo. So this is where I did my research, at the Philadelphia Zoo, and we had to pick an animal to study. And so I picked an animal that had just shown up at the Philadelphia Zoo a few days before I got there. At the time, it was a relatively unknown animal. That's the capybara, the world's largest rodent. In the past 5 years or so, I've discovered that they've become so popular on social media. It used to be when I went into a school and asked people if they'd ever heard of the capybara, there would be no hands up at all. And now everybody, it's like their favorite animal. So I ended up when I did my research on these animals, not only was there no social media, there was no internet. I had to go to the college library to see what I could find on them, and I found nothing on them, which turned out to be because nothing really had been written about the capybara when I first started researching the capybara. I, by sort of accident, became one of the world experts on the capybara because I knew 3 things, but that was 3 more things than anybody else knew. So there was a brief window of time where I knew a lot, and my professor was very excited. He wanted me to go to the zoo a lot, to be there at all sorts of hours of the day, to watching these animals first thing in the morning or late in the evening. So I got a special pass to go to the zoo, which allowed me in pretty much whenever I wanted to go, as long as there were zookeepers there. And this allowed me to sort of see how a zoo operated behind the scenes. And I started hanging out with zookeepers and talking to them about like kind of funny stories they'd heard about things that had happened at other zoos. And a couple of funny things happened at our zoo as well. And I really, because I wanted to be an author more than I wanted to be a field biologist, I started to think that a zoo would be a really interesting place to set a story. And one day wandering around the zoo, I hit upon this idea about doing a mystery series set in a zoo where crimes could occur to animals, and somebody who knew a lot about animals could solve those crimes. And therefore, it would be a series that would sort of blend my love of animals and ecology and mystery. And so then I think, which animals did I want to do? And as much as I love capybaras, they really weren't that popular. So I started to go with animals that were really popular at the zoo, like hippos, which I had thought when I came to the zoo were these sort of docile, gentle animals. And that turned out to be completely and totally wrong, that they're very aggressive and territorial and far more dangerous to humans than any of the carnivorous animals in Africa. And I thought, man, this is just a fun animal to sort of set at the center of a mystery. But, that was just one animal, and there were all these other animals I found fascinating. So I started to, invent stories that could involve other animals like koalas and rhinos and giant pandas and mountain lions and grizzly bears. Most recently, I've done a blue whale, which, of course, this is not an actual blue whale. It's the one from the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. I have been able to see them in the wild, but they're not quite as dramatic. I mean, it's an enormous animal. That's generally about as much as you can see of a blue whale. And even that was not. There were still so many other animals that I wanted to sort of talk about. So I found ways to work in other animals into the stories, like in other subplots or secondary mysteries involving elephants and giraffes and tigers and dolphins and crocodiles and sloths and hyenas and penguins and orangutans. What I love about writing this series is that I can share this information, so that I get to be kind of get to be a biologist as well as being an author when I write it. Now, I guess, like, sort of taking a page from that and realizing that research was really sort of core to like inspiration for me. The Charlie Thorne series was inspired, not surprisingly, by Albert Einstein, but another visit to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, where there was many years ago, there was an exhibit on Albert Einstein, and it was talking not just about his science, but also about who he was as a person. And I started to think that, although we generally see Einstein as like this, because that's when more photos were taken of him. He was a child at one point. I started to wonder what he would be like as a child, and so I did a lot of research onto what the geniuses, these great geniuses, were like as children. And I thought, I started to hit upon this idea of, wouldn't it be interesting if Einstein had hidden something away, and that only somebody as smart as him could track it down? Somebody would have to know their science, their history. I started to put together an idea for how to tell this story, but I did want to do as much research as possible, which involved reading lots of books, but I really wanted to sort of follow in Einstein's footsteps. Now, some of that was relatively easy for me to do. This is the Mount Wilson Observatory, where all of Einstein's theories about the universe were confirmed by Edwin Hubble. This is not particularly far from where I live in Los Angeles, and it's relatively easy to get up there. But there were other places I want to go, and I had an incredible twist of fate where I happened to mention to somebody that I would like to go to Israel to do some research, and was told that there was an organization running a free trip for authors to Israel. So I applied, and I was invited to go along. So that took me to many of the places that you see in the book. So here is a statue of Einstein at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. This is one of the underground. This is the underground aqueduct that scene takes place, and I didn't even know this existed, but they gave us a tour and took us down into this amazing location. This is one of the underground markets in Jerusalem. Here is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Here are some of the rooftops that you can get on and walk around. You can see the Dome of the Rock in the background. So in getting to go here and sort of walk around, I was just I came up with all these scenes that never could have existed in the book if I hadn't had a chance to go there. Because I didn't even know that a place like this, where you can go on the rooftops or the underground aqueducts, even existed until I ended up in them. So this sort of drove the future books in the series, wanting to go to places that these great, brilliant minds had done their work. So for Darwin, I went to the Galapagos Islands and Quito in Ecuador. A scene happens on this spire, into the Amazon. For Cleopatra, who often is not lumped in with the great geniuses, but she really was. She was brilliant. She was, by many accounts, the most educated woman who ever existed in the Western world up until her time. History is often not so kind to her and overlooks her brilliance in favor of her love affairs. But she was an amazing leader and a brilliant person. And so, for Cleopatra, you don't just go to the pyramids in Egypt. She traveled around the world quite a lot for somebody who lived 2,000 years ago. So she got to the Acropolis in Athens. She lived in Rome for a while. And I'll give you a sneak peek that next spring, the fourth book in this series will be coming, Charlie Thorne and the Royal Society. This focuses on Isaac Newton, and my research on this took me, not surprisingly, to Cambridge and the Tower of London, where Newton studied and worked. But also, I figured out a way to sort of a little bit of a twist where it'll take us a few more farther flung places, like the Great Barrier Reef in Australia and a volcano in Hawaii. Then there is the Spy School series, which actually is the oldest idea I have of any of my series, because when I was about in 6th grade, I saw my first James Bond movie, and my friends also too. We were all very blown away by James Bond. Everybody ran around pretending to be as suave and debonair as James Bond, but because I wanted to be a writer, I went a little farther than everybody else, and I wrote what we would now call fan fiction. This is not exactly a James Bond story. It is a Jimmy Bond story. It is about James Bond's son, and in this story, Jimmy is not actually a spy. He's just pretending to be a spy, wants to grow up and be like his father. And I had an idea, there's sort of a one-off joke in this about the fact that he goes to a top secret spy school to learn how to be a spy. So this is an idea I've had since I was in 6th grade. And I knew that there was something there in that spy school idea. And I kept coming back to it over and over through the years, trying to figure out how to tell a story set in spy school. It took me a while to do it. It took me even longer to sell it, but eventually that happened. It worked out pretty well because I didn't just get one book, but I got many books in this series because I had so many other ideas. So my spies have not just gone to spy school now. They've gone to spy camp. They've infiltrated the evil spy school. They have gone to exotic locations like ski resorts and the White House and the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. They've London and Paris. They fought crime on a cruise ship. They've had car chases and fights on top of moving trains and aerial dogfights and even airboat chases. So this all leads up. That's through book 10, and I thought since it only comes out in less than a week, I might give you a sneak preview of my newest book, which is Spy School Goes North, which I know you're kind of in the north up there in Vermont. I do apologize. I went a little farther north than that. I went to Alaska. I happened to go to Alaska just when the world was opening up after COVID. My father had a pretty difficult time during COVID, and I wanted to take him someplace that there weren't very many other people. And so we ended up at this spot in Kenai Fjords National Park. This is an aerial photo of where we were. You can see there's a very large glacier over to the left that was to our west that we were able to sort of get out and hike on that glacier. We were able to kayak to other glaciers. We stayed, and this is all the cabins in the entire place. There were just these 6 cabins, so not very many people. Quite a lot of bears, though. There were far more bears than people when we were there. A decent amount of moose that you could get surprisingly close. This moose got so I didn't want me to be that close, so he kind of gave me the raspberry there. If you were kayaking, there were even whales and orcas out, and so I became sort of fascinated by this place and started to imagine that it was a really interesting setting for a spy school novel. So that drove me to start thinking a lot about the state of Alaska, which has a history that's very different from any of the other states in the United States. That this is a state that was actually owned by the Russians. It was also the only state that we ever during World War II, some of Alaska was conquered was captured by the Japanese. So other countries have laid claim to part of Alaska, and that seemed like a good setting for a spy story. Of course, the other thing that we all know about Alaska is that it's absolutely enormous. There it is, superimposed on the United States. But I found this, that I thought it was, here it is compared to the entire continent of Europe, and it's really about half the size of all of Europe there. It is so big, it's impossible to get to every place you might want to go in Alaska. Even people who live in Alaska have usually barely seen a fraction of it. But I was fascinated by all sorts of areas, ranging from the Brooks Range in the far north with its massive herds of caribou to the Arctic Sea with its huge ice flows. I actually had been hearing from a young reader in a place called Kotzebue, which I was interested in. It's the largest city north of the Arctic Circle in the United States, and yet that's pretty much it there. It can fit inside the entire population can fit inside a standard high school gymnasium. These are all places I couldn't quite get to all these places, but I did realize that I could get to one place I really wanted to visit, which is out there on the Alaska Peninsula at the bottom, which is much more south than a lot of Alaska, but still lots of it is pretty remote. I had to fly into this location with my family. We ended up on this beach, which this is the farthest I've ever been from another human being in my life. We were 45 miles from the next humans at the very minimum. So not very many humans there, but here I am with my kids, and you can see we are quite close to a lot of walruses out there, which is part of the reason we came. Also, a great number of grizzly bears in the area, far more grizzlies than humans. This mother had her 3 cubs, and she was not happy to see us at all. She was about the size of a good-sized sedan. This is a very large bear. Who was very unhappy with us, so we had to get out of there pretty quickly. So I took all what as I tend to do with my books. I took what my experiences that I had. I took all the research I did, and I started to sort of fold all that into the idea for Spy School Goes North, which will come out next Tuesday. So that's sort of like a view there into how my like the amount of research I put into the books, and a bit of where the inspiration comes from. So I do like to encourage kids, because when I talk to schools and find out that often a lot of young kids are interested in being a writer, I do try to impress upon them that I think the best way to come up with ideas is to just be curious about the world, and that whether that's reading or traveling. I realize lots of kids can't just tell their parents they're going to go off to Alaska and do research, but I do impress upon them that if they ask their parents to take them to the local library or a local museum or go hiking somewhere, that their parents would probably love to do that, and that the more that they can explore the world, the more likely they are to have ideas for their own writing. So that is kind of the overview of the books, and I believe we've got some ways to take some questions here, so I'm happy to get into that. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure.
And if you want to, can you just stop sharing your screen? Maybe that's.
Oh gosh! Oh, I was just,
having that weird mirror thing
weird.
happening.
Yeah, I did. Okay, I thought I pressed it. Sorry to.
No worries. Oh no,
Yeah.
no worries
Okay.
at all.
Okay.
No, thank you so much. So yeah, folks, you can put your questions in the chat. You can also use the raise hand function, and we can turn on your mic. Or for anybody from the committee, you can turn on your mic and ask a question.
All right, John, do you want to? You'll facilitate?
Yes. Yep. We will.
Okay.
So the first question we have is start by saying you're so productive. how do you manage working simultaneously on so many different series?
So I think well, I like working on multiple series because each time I do a different series, it sort of gives me a break from one of the other ones. I think if I was only doing one series, I might get sort of bored of that, and so I like shifting around. It did take me a couple years to come up with a system. I have so I'm pretty regimented about how I work. I do carry around yellow pads a lot of the time, so I'm always brainstorming ideas. The authors, I don't know if this ever comes up in your schools or libraries, that we tend to divide ourselves into plotters and pantsers. So the plotters plot everything out, and the pantsers fly by the seat of their pants. You don't really, you could be a bit of one or the other, so I'm a big plotter, and I'm a big believer in outlining and working out my stories ahead of time and knowing where my story is going to go before I start. So I may not know every single bit of that story, but I'll certainly have a good idea of how I want to get from A to B to C all the way to Z. And so having that sort of framework before I start certainly, I think, speeds up my process. Even though it's more time ahead of time, it is actually less writing time when you get into it. And it precludes the idea that I might get halfway through a book and realize I don't know how to end it.
Yeah. Thanks. The next question is who's asking, what's the timeline for the continuation of the Spy School graphic novels?
So the idea is that my publisher and I really, Anjan Sarkar, who is my incredibly talented illustrator, is sort of shouldering the really heavy burden on this. So we're trying to do one of those a year. So the next one, Evil Spy School, will be out, I think around March 3rd of the first week of March. And Anjan he can do about one a year. And so that is sort of the plan, is to have one come out. So they'll be always well behind the Spy School series. And unless we can clone Anjan, I don't know that we can speed that process up.
The next question, they start by saying that your books are so popular at their school. They have one kiddo who reads and rereads them. Favorite is Charlie Thorne. Not really a question, but figured I would share it with you.
Thank you. Awesome.
And the next one is, I have two reluctant readers who latched onto the Spy School series. They have now become enthusiastic readers and have recommended that their classmates should try the books. And then they said that I know that their graphic novels will hook even more kids.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think this is, besides state lists, it's pretty much word of mouth. That's how kids hear about books, from librarians and teachers and other kids. So that's I'm thankful to kids like that.
Yeah. Let's see. We have again, thank you for your books. My readers at school and kids at home love them. Have you considered writing picture books for younger reader versus middle grade novels?
I wrote one. I wrote a story for my daughter when she was little, and I would love it if that could be converted into a picture book. It just hasn't quite happened yet. I never really locked the title, but it was about Fifi Frimsy Pop Warrior Princess, who it was kind of the Ransom of Red Chief, where she gets kidnapped by pirates who think that they'll hold her for ransom, and she turns out to be a very non-stereotypical princess, and not only manages her own escape, but defeats all the pirates before the rescue mission can show up. So I don't know. Maybe someday I'll get that out there.
And then the next question is, have they optioned any of your books for movies? Seems like they'd make great films. That would be awesome.
Spy School has been optioned twice, and that has fallen apart both times. If you've been following Hollywood, we just ended our writers' strike.
Yeah.
Basically, we were allowed to talk to producers, but not studios over the course of the strike. So I've been talking to quite a lot of producers who would like to try and make Spy School. I am trying to actually figure out what the next steps in that process are, and maybe who we'll go with on that. Charlie Thorne actually has been optioned by an independent producer, and I wrote the script for that. That also has been hamstrung by actually really more of the actors' strike. So ideally, maybe when that ends, we might try to push that forward. We'll have to see. So those two have got some possibility, and I don't know. I would love it if every single thing I wrote got turned into a movie, but it's not. It's a tough road to get something made.
Yeah, I'm sure it's quite the process, and I'm sure it's possible some of those things may get picked up again at some point. I imagine. I hope so.
I hope, yeah.
You were mentioning the graphic novels earlier, and there's a question about how you work with the graphic illustrator, and just asking if there's like a lot of interaction around the art, or they are sort of do their own thing.
There's probably less interaction around the art than you would think if I end up with the right illustrator, and so Anjan has been really fantastic, and we work with there's a art director at Simon Schuster, who Lucy Cummins, who has written and illustrated a lot of really wonderful children's picture books, as well as also doing my covers. So it's pretty unusual that Lucy does anybody's covers. She is an incredibly talented artist, because her picture books look nothing like my covers. So she and I will, Anjan will send his work to us, but because it's so visual, Lucy's comments are usually far more incisive than my comments on the art. Most of my comments are like, yeah, what Lucy said. But I do create the script for the book, for the graphic novel, which there are various ways to do that. There are some I did a graphic novel for DC earlier this year. I did something called Bruce Wayne Not Super, which is a Bruce Wayne in middle school, being the only kid in his middle school without superpowers, and that I really had to break everything down and go panel by panel. But Anjan is okay if I just give him like a basic script, and then he works out how to lay out the entire book, and really just does an incredible job. So he really takes on a lot in this.
Thanks. There's a couple questions about. We have a question about, do your kids read your books and give feedback? And then the second related question is, how have your kids influenced your books with ideas for editing?
So when I started writing my books, my son was 2 and my daughter was in utero, so they've sort of grown up and been my exact target audience, and now have sort of moved on. So when we were in that kind of sweet spot, they were very influential. Charlie was really created. I did a little focus group with my daughter and her friends, a couple girls are a little bit older, and they were the ones who came up with the name Charlie Thorne. They told me all the stuff Charlie should be able to do. When Charlie, in the first draft, Charlie was actually a little too James Bond. They wanted her to be able to do everything perfectly, and she was just a little too unbelievably amazing for a 12-year-old. So that was something I ultimately kind of used against her, because I just made her really cocky and think she could do everything. She can do an awful lot, but making Charlie a girl was very important for my daughter. That I had written so many books about young boys, which that was a lot because I was a young boy. I had some idea of how young boys think, which for good and bad. But there have been other parts throughout the various series that they've influenced. You can see that they were. I brought them along to Alaska that second time. We try to go to a lot of interesting places, and if my kids turn to me while we're someplace and say there should be an action sequence here, then I know there should be an action. Usually, I'm kind of thinking the same thing. When they were younger, we had actually worked out they had worked out the action sequence on the Eiffel Tower, and I didn't even intend for British invasion to go to. It's called it wasn't supposed to go to France at all. But I was like, I got to move it to France because we have this action scene. My son, when I was working on the Fun Jungle series, learned how few North African white rhinos were left in the world. There were only 8 at the time. Now, sadly, we're down to 2. And he said, "I've got it. You should write something about rhinos," which was a heavier topic. Like the idea of animals going extinct was a heavier topic than I had thought about for the series. But that really did start to change the arc of that series, because it became much more concerned with real world threats to animals and the environment. So yeah, my kids have been very influential. And when they were younger, I used to read them early drafts of the book. And that would be I did read them other books, but sometimes for our story time, we did that. And they got to the point where my daughter would sit there with a red pen. And if she'd say like, "Oh, you used that same word like 3 pages ago." And she loves circling crossing it out. And, it's a shame that I don't have that editorial staff working for me.
Thanks. There's a question: how many Charlie Thorne books do you plan to make?
I'm
not idea?
Completely sure. I was thinking that this series might run for a while, but I'm not sure. That's
fair.
It is, of all my series, it's actually it is kind of the one that involves far more research and I've got to create a new code every time and figure it. So it takes me longer to write a Charlie Thorne than it does to write any of the other books. I've started this Once Upon a Tim series for younger readers, which is a lot of fun. It's illustrated, and I will be completely honest, it takes me far less time to write one of those books than a Charlie. So those are all sorts of things I have to kind of weigh going forward. I do find that adults tend to tell me that they like Charlie Thorne more than the other books, and so I've got a lot of friends who do not want me to end that series, but
yeah.
I'll have to think about
it. So this is, I guess, sort of similar. Well, not similar, but this question is asking about if you have a favorite series or book that you've done and why, which I know might be a tricky question,
that is.
But...
I mean, I know there are others out there who say that they do have a favorite, but I fall into that category of feeling like saying which of my kids is my favorite, and I do not, for the record. I do not have a favorite kid. they all, even when something is a lot of work, like Charlie, I still, I do try to make that the best thing possible, and I put a lot of time and effort into all of them. That's the thing, is I think in terms of series, like if I really only like writing one series, then I would only write that one series. And the reason I jump around is because I do like writing all of them. It just, some are more work than others. That doesn't mean it's less fun. It's just more work.
So you shared with us that you've wanted to be an author for a very long time. Did you always know that you wanted to write for kids? And how did that process happen? And then the second part of that is, what advice would you have for kids who hope to become authors?
Oh, yeah, no, I did not intend to write for kids at all. Well, when I was a kid, anything I wrote was probably aimed at kids. But as I got older, I was really thinking I was going to write for adults. And then what happened was I was off. I hadn't sold a book, so I went to work in the film business, and I had a career writing movies and creating television shows that rarely got on the air. So 15 and a half years ago was the last time that the Writers Guild of America struck. And during that strike, I was picketing, but I thought, oh, maybe this is not a bad time to think about writing a book again, because you were allowed to write a book. You couldn't write a movie, you write a book. And so I was represented by an agency that actually had a book division in New York. And so I said, could I talk to one of the agents there? And I guess they sent me some of my work, and she called me up, and she was the one who said, had I thought about writing for middle grade? And it seems kind of bizarre to even think that 15 and a half years ago, they were like, middle grade had, like, boys had really been kind of ignored. They knew that boys were reading like Harry Potter, but they kind of thought, well, that was a one-off. And then Percy Jackson and Diary of a Wimpy Kid had come out, and my publisher was saying, oh gosh, we need stuff that boys will like. That's because girls are great, and if you give a girl girls will read anything. They'll be like, oh, boy's the main character, I don't care. If you give a boy something, say girl's the main character, you really have to twist their arm to get them to do that. Originally I had actually thought that Belly Up would be a mystery for adults, that it was the zoo vet who realized that the hippo had been murdered and wanted to figure out who did it. And but the moment that this agent suggested writing for middle grade, I realized that was actually a pretty good crime for kids to solve. And Spy School, even though it sounds like it's kind of a kids thing, I had for a long time thought maybe they were at college, those were two ideas that I thought, oh, I can lower the age of my protagonist relatively easily and tell a good story. So I feel like I was probably in the right place at the right time to sort of catch the rise of middle grade. That's all good. Oh, and wait, was there
any advice for young people who want to become authors?
Oh, yeah. So I was talking about the thing about being curious earlier, and kids are always saying, like, how do you have so many more ideas than I do? And I'm always like, because I've been around longer than you have, right? But I think they obviously they should not just be trying to write; they should be trying to read as much as they can. And I think it's important for them to know that they can try. There is this push. A lot of kids write fan fiction, which is all well and good, but trying to emulate the writing style of authors they like, I think is a good trick. That if it's not fan fiction, they can't really sell their own stories. But if they wrote something similar to an author that they like, and then that really is their own idea. And so there are certainly authors that I have been really trying to emulate, like their writing style throughout my career. People like Ellen Raskin, who wrote The Weston Game, or how Donald J. Sobel in the Encyclopedia Brown series would have encyclopedia's knowledge of facts come in to help solve a crime. And so I think if you can let kids know, like, look, you can learn from these other authors, and if you try and write a book like an author you admire, that's not really plagiarism. That's kind of an homage. You're not going to end up writing the same way as them, and so that's a good way to sort of let them, I guess, hit the ground running, is to find someone they like and try and emulate that style.
Thanks. And we have a couple that are more comments than questions. I think the Charlie Thorne series is a great way to keep older middle schoolers, 7th, 8th graders reading, which is when so many kids start reading less. So no pressure, but please keep writing them.
I'm going to try.
And then similar, this comment is, my son and I listen to the Charlie books together, and he loves them.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Well, that's good. It's always good. I mean, I always owe such a great debt to my audiobook people, because there's so many people who love listening to those, and it's just it's a real talent to be able to read a book.
That is.
Yeah.
Have a couple more here. This is a good one. My own 3 children, huge fans, wanted me to ask you if Ben and Erica will end up together.
I like one of the nice things about being an author in this day and age is the amount of feedback you can get from your readers. So my readers can write to me on website, or they can come up to me at events, and I was very surprised by the amount of interest in the relationships in my books, and it is interesting because I'm writing for middle graders, and when middle graders were just coming up, like just the sheer amount of people saying, can Ben and Erica end up together, and I'd be like, I don't, what do you want to happen, right? And all they want is for them to be together, right? They don't really. That's as far as they've gone. They should be together, but it took me a while to kind of grasp that, and so when in the series, when I sort of thought, well, maybe I should find a way to keep them apart, and have Erica tell Ben there's it's not going to happen, and then there was kind of a backlash where kids wanted Ben to end up with Zoe, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. But I do feel that Ben and Erica are kind of meant for each other, and that part of my thought through the whole series is that Erica makes Ben a better spy, but Ben makes Erica a better person, and they actually do form a good team. I can't say that this series is going to go on until college, and they get or post college. They're not going to be married and going on missions with their kids or anything. I think it'll end before that, but I think they are kind of meant to be. So.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions. How do you go about differentiating your writing for audiences of different ages?
Oh, I don't really ever like to write down to my audience. I don't think kids like that very much, and so even when I did the Once Upon a Tim, I wanted I still wanted to use like words that I loved, and so I came up with this idea of having this. Oh, my dog just walked into my office. Having IQ boosters, where I would use large words, or maybe the occasional scientific term. Oh my gosh, hold on. All right. so I would do that, and then I could, explain the word or whatever I wanted, and then I could make the argument to tell the kids they could go argue it to their parents that what they were reading was educational and they should be allowed to read it even if it was silly. It's so like it's a little less, but in talking about like emulating authors, like I loved Shel Silverstein as a kid, and he wrote like some great books like Lafcadio, The Lion Shot Back, or Uncle Shelby's ABC book, where he was definitely putting jokes in there for the adults, and but kids could read them too, and he had this sort of very arch style, and so I just kind of thought like yeah, I'm not going to necessarily take on a topic as heavy as what I might bring up in a Charlie Thorne book or something like that, but I still would, if I was talking to a young kid, I would still sort of talk to them, and I wouldn't talk down to them. I would talk to them like they could understand anything I wanted to tell them, and so I think it's more sort of subject matter that I avoid, and not necessarily that the writing style is a little different, but not dramatically different.
Thanks. And this is kind of related to is there any desire to write for like a beginning chapter book for younger audiences, like a mystery?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think Tim has been a bit of an experiment to sort of go a little bit younger. I mean, that really did come out of a conversation with my publisher about saying, like, because I originally thought that Charlie might be a young adult, and they had said no, stay in middle grade. So it certainly, I think, reads a little old. I mean, like, one of the things that I feel is kind of is that there, as I was pointing out, there's not that much adventure written in young adult, and so kids tend to sort of hit that phase and maybe end up having to go, look at the adult fiction. So I thought that, but they really felt like I kind of needed to stay middle grade, and with Tim, they were saying, oh well, let's go younger and try and get people a little bit earlier. And hook them in so that I don't know, we can dominate the world, I guess. I don't know, but so we could go a little bit younger than that. But Tim now is, I mean, I really would like to do more of those. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know that we'll go even younger, but unless I get that picture book in.
Yeah. There's also actually the last question that we have is, have you thought about writing a nonfiction book about animals?
Yeah, I actually have. I think, and I don't know if it's adult or middle grade. I really want to write a book. As you may have been able to tell from my photos, and I am pretty fascinated by animals, and in particular charismatic megafauna, which are just big. I mean, I'm not alone in this. People like to go see all the big animals, so I've thought about writing something about. I've had a lot of adventures and sometimes misadventures. I'm trying to see all the world's charismatic megafauna, which a lot of it is in danger of extinction, and I really have almost seen all of it in the wild. I mean, there's a few animals I'm missing, and I feel like maybe when I get I'm trying to see some gorillas next year, and then maybe I gotta like snorkel with whale sharks or something, and then I don't. So I'm trying to get all this, and I've been just keeping like notes and stories from this stuff over the years. So I somewhere along the line, I probably would like to write like something that's scientific and autobiographical about not just these animals, but going off to see them, and what we have to do to make sure that other generations will be able to see them as well.
Well, that would be awesome. Hope to see that happen. Well, that's what we have for the questions. Hey, thank you for taking so much time to answer so
Sure.
many questions. Is there anything else that, like, any projects in the works that you want to talk about, or any sort of like final thoughts to share with folks?
Well, I'll say I'm sorry I haven't been to Vermont in a while. I'm not trying to pander here, but it is a lovely state, and it's just at the opposite side of the country for me. So my son really likes hiking, and I figure like he's looking at some schools in the east, and if he I don't know, well maybe we'll end up there, and but it, like I said, I wouldn't say no to the possibility about coming to visit Vermont if schools and libraries wanted to bring me out there, especially in the fall. The spring would be nice.
Awesome.
And so
I'm sure there'd be a lot of interest in that.
But yeah, no, I do. I am very thankful to everybody who I mean, all of you who are, you know, trying to get kids to love reading, and it is, you know, someone noted this idea that they start to drop off around middle grade, and I sadly feel like a lot of that is that schools start to tell everybody that, you know, like they start reading, they start taking the fun out of reading, and so the only way that you've got those kids who manage to still sort of hang on, and they're still coming to the library and realizing no, not reading is really one of the greatest enjoyments in life, and that's all due to people like you. So I am very thankful for that, and I wasn't joking about that story about belly up at the beginning. That was really my introduction to school lists, and saying like I was wondering like if people in Vermont just really like dead hippos, or maybe they hated hippos. I don't know. But it was this list. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us today, taking time to talk to us. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you. All right. Well, that was awesome. Hope that was inspiring. Definitely was for me. It's always great to hear a little bit behind the scenes, and I love hearing about the spike in sales from being on the list. That's fantastic. Love it. Turn it over to the book award committee in just a second. I'm just going to do a very quick overview of the book award, and then I'm going to turn it over to and we'll let them introduce themselves and go over the list and the resources. So the Vermont Golden Dome Book Award, formerly the Dorothy Canfield Fisher Book Award, was created to honor excellence in children's literature. And each year since 1957, Vermont students in grades 4 through 8 have selected their favorite book from a list of nominees. Each year, committee members work tirelessly, and I emphasized earlier with the GMBA, tirelessly is really, it's an enormous amount of work. But they read as many books as they can in a single year, that are published in a single year, and then narrow it down to a list of 25 amazing books, which they're going to share with you now. So I'm going to turn it over to Becky Rupp, the committee chair, to introduce the rest of the committee and talk about the list.
Okay, guys. And now, in a spectacular demonstration of technological expertise, I will try to share.
Love that confidence. You got it. You got it.
Okay, well, just for starts, let's look at this. This is all of us. And today you will be hearing from 5 wonderful librarians. And then you will notice me, the oddball here. I am a writer, scientist, but I like to think that I have a different perspective sometimes. And everyone is always very kind to me about this. So it seems to have worked out pretty well so far. One thing we've got that is new this year is we have a website. And there is the address. It's still a bit of a work in progress, but let me see if I can show it to you. Okay. And there we are. So I hope you'll all take a look at this when you get a chance. It's got the list of the committee, a way to contact us, something about the award, and then all the books that are on the current year's list of 25 with links to the handbook, which has activities, resources, companion books, and some info about the author. So what we actually thought that we would do this year, instead of our usual speed reading our way through every single book on the list, since the list has been out for a few months now, is that we take the time to talk about some in a little bit more detail. And we'll run through as many as we can, and hopefully we'll have some time for discussion and questions at the end, which is always the fun part, and we seldom get to do this. So I will kick this off with one of my favorites from this year's list, which is Seen and Unseen. This is by Elizabeth Partridge. And it's basically, this is a fascinating book. I was really blown away by this one. It's basically a picture book for older readers. It's illustrated in a combo of photographs, sketches, pictures of historical documents. And what it's about is the story of the World War II imprisonment of people of Japanese ancestry on the West Coast for the duration of the war. So 3 very different photographers went and took pictures of these internment camps. And the photographers all had totally different takes on the camps. The first one up in the book is Dorothea Lange, who was very much opposed to the camps. And apparently they came down on her like a ton of bricks. She was very restricted in what she could take pictures of, no barbed wire, no guard towers. But her interpretation of what the camps were like still shows up in her photographs. The second photographer was a Japanese photographer who was actually a prisoner in the camp. His name was Toyo Mayatake. And the reason he got to take pictures was that he had smuggled in a camera lens. And in the camp workshop, he actually, he and a friend built himself a box camera. And he, from a prisoner's point of view, took as many photos as he could with his box camera. He had friends who would smuggle in film and chemicals for developing film. And eventually, toward the end of the war, he was actually permitted to take pictures so he could set up a legitimate darkroom. But so Dorothea Lange, who hated the camps, Toyo Mayatake, who was himself a prisoner, and then the third was Ansel Adams. And Ansel Adams, of course, he went to Manzanar, I think, and which was surrounded by incredible scenery. So there are a lot of these Adams photographs that picture the camp in this gorgeous natural setting. And Adams was in favor of the Japanese incarceration. He thought that this made for a secure America during war. So his pictures tend to put a very positive spin on the camps. I had not seen a book like this for young readers that actually contrasts the way in which photos can really spin a story in very different ways. And I started researching this a little bit, and evidently there were a whole series of photos that were done of the so-called Indian schools, the Indian boarding schools that sprang up in the late 19th century and early 20th, where there were a lot of photos that put a spin on these schools that made it look like happy children in an enriched environment, and this is all to the good, rather than showing the very negative sides of these schools. And I thought, there's a lot that you could do in a school or library program about photography and deception. Especially nowadays when we've got Photoshop, we've got airbrushing, we could do all kinds of things. But there are a number of things that you could actually do with kids. For example, what about photographing your hometown and put a positive spin on it and a negative spin on it? Could you do that? And there are all kinds of, there's actually a couple of packs of cards that are for would-be photographers that are sort of like story prompts for photographers. So what the kids see is individual cards that just say something on them like eyes or boiling water or something from a thrift shop. And they're challenged to go out and take a creative picture or pictures that would show this. I looked into possibly doing a grant on this. There are a number of places that I think would support this. For example, the Vermont Arts Council might have something there. And immediately I went out and attempted to price small disposable cameras on Amazon that we could hand out to kids. That didn't turn out all that great, but in terms of a grant, that might work like a charm. Let's see, I have completely lost where we can go to stop sharing. But that's about all I had to say about seen and unseen, but I would highly recommend this book. This was unusual, very original, and I think there's a lot to talk about there. I think this could be a fun one for your schools and libraries. So next up is Sasha.
Hello, my name is Sasha Krosik. I'm the Youth Services Librarian at the Fletcher Memorial Library in Ludlow, Vermont. I just started my 9th year here, and I am here to talk to you about the wonderful and adorable book, Otter. I don't know if I can't see myself presenting, so I don't know what you're seeing. So hopefully you are seeing the cover.
It looks great. Okay. Do you want me to share the website?
I don't think so. I think I'm good for right now, but thanks for offering. All right, so Otter by Catherine Applegate. This is a novel in verse. It's written free verse. I was going to start off with a little part of the book that says, "Meet Otter, the queen of play. Nobody has her moves. She doesn't just swim to the bottom, she dive bombs. She doesn't just somersault, she triple donuts. She doesn't just ride the waves, she makes them." So Otter is a very inquisitive, curious, fun-loving otter that lives in the ocean outside of Monterey Bay, California. Unfortunately, her curiosity gets her into a little bit of trouble a few times, and she finds herself under the care of the rehabilitation team at the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. And this story is loosely based on a program that they run there for otters that are unable to be reintroduced back into the ocean, and they use them to be surrogates for baby otters that do have the possibility of being reintroduced into the ocean. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the awesome website that the Monterey Bay Aquarium has. I probably definitely not going to be able to see this, but I took a little screenshot of the front page of their web page, which is, I think it's www.montereybayaquarium.org. So when you get to the top, there's two sections that I found that were particularly helpful. One says for educators and the other was animals. And under the educators tabs, they have just a plethora of useful information. They have video lessons. There's one called Busy Sea Otters. They said it's for like grades pre-K to 2, but it's not babyish at all. And I think if you don't tell your students that it's supposed to be for that level, that it would be, they would just be mesmerized by seeing the otters and learning a little bit more about them. They also have some online courses for grades K through 12. They have one called Otter Spotters, which ties in excellently with this book. They have some called Exploring the Deep. Also, there's a section called Crafts and Printables. And there you can find the directions and materials to make this very adorable otter puppet. And Courtney, who's also on the committee, has another version of it. If you go on Google and just look up otter paper bag puppet, you can find a couple different versions. So I really like Courtney's. Hers has the baby. Mine has the using tools. It has a little rock to help open up the shell. So they have several different kinds of artsy craftsy things that you can do. Let's see, what another great thing that they have is they have a live sea otter camera, which is really cool. But I found that I tend to look at it on the morning, during the morning here, and I haven't seen any. Then it dawned on me that they are several hours after us, delayed. So I think the otters probably aren't morning people, and they're not up at the crack of dawn to California time. So maybe if you try it in the afternoon, you might be able to catch a glimpse of some of the otters doing their cool stuff. So that is all I have for that, and I'll throw it back to Becky.
Okay. Well, next up is Katie, who's going to talk about the sheep, the rooster, and the duck, which I absolutely adored.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled. I'm a little disappointed to say I do not have any visual aids because they would have been so fun to prepare for this book. So The Sheep, the Rooster, and the Duck, which I never can remember the title in the right order, is the work of Matt Phelan. And you likely have read books by this author before. He's a rather prolific author, graphic novelist. He uses sort of spare artwork to tell what I would describe as works of quiet beauty, so rather serious in the past. But for this title, I think his brain snapped and he woke up one morning talking in a French accent and just decided to write this ridiculous work of what is very decidedly historical fiction. So this book features the sheep, the rooster, and the duck, who were veteran aeronauts, much like Laika the space dog in the first hot air balloon voyage that was the Montgolfier hot air balloon voyage. And reportedly, when the balloon came down, the only injury had been that the sheep kicked the rooster, which was considered a great success and opened the door for many great human aeronauts. I fell right down the rabbit hole researching this book, so I'm going to refer to my own handbook entry here. I had the best time researching this because the book is this whirlwind adventure that follows Benjamin Franklin's young butler on escapades through through Britain in 1783, or sorry, through France. So Benjamin Franklin was actually there working to find allies for the Revolutionary War, but in this book, his secret journal full of dangerous inventions falls into the wrong hands. And the course of the book leads us on sort of this whirlwind adventure to recover the lost journal. So we're introduced to all of these historical figures through a really hysterical lens. Amadeus Mozart makes an appearance, although in the course of the book, he has been hypnotized to believe he's a chicken, which is hugely entertaining. Teen readers who have read this book in our library suggested that it really should have been Johann Sebastian Bach, but that would not have fit our timeline.
Perfectly delivered, by the way.
Oh, yes, thank you. So we're introduced to all these wonderful people. I left a little link on the workbook handbook entry that takes us through Trianon, which was Marie Antoinette's Hamlet that was supposed to let her enjoy a rural life despite the demands of being the Queen of France. She didn't go there to pretend she was a peasant, as the book suggests, but it is pretty neat to see this funny little village in the middle of Versailles. It also features, for those Charlie Thorne enthusiasts, a daring aeronaut named Sophie, who in my research I decided was likely based on Sophie Blanchard, who was a very daring aeronaut who had a penchant for pyrotechnics and also hot air balloons, which led to her untimely demise. The epitaph on her gravestone read that she was a victim of her own art and intrepidity, but she had many adventures leading up to that occurrence. So I just fell right down the rabbit hole investigating the adventures and inventions of Benjamin Franklin. I put links up for his invention of the glass harmonica and the compositions made for it by Mozart, and then how to make your own. It has been listed as the most dangerous instrument, so I put up directions for a simpler experiment using glasses and water to make singing wine glasses. I also listed a whole bunch of different animals through history who it would be interesting for kids to write historical fiction through the lens of these different animals. So Jonathan the tortoise is one of the longest living tortoises in existence. Clara the rhinoceros. Punxsutawney Phil, who I didn't realize has many Canadian brethren and weather predicting creatures from all over. He is said to have been, there's said to have only been one Punxsutawney Phil through time. So that would be a fun legend to explore as well. In general, this was just an absolutely ridiculous book that I think kids will get sucked right into. And for adults, I learned a lot. I mean, everything that I read, I wanted to read more. And for those of you who are, if any of you are authors, please look into the Affair of the Diamond Necklace, which was this incredible story that I found having to do with Marie Antoinette that maybe is not for child readers, but for adult readers. It was just wacky and interesting. So highly recommend to anyone who tends to go for graphic novels, but might be sucked into some historic fiction in a nefarious way.
The other thing, yes, if you're into the diamond necklace, there's a book for adults called Stoned, which is not exactly what it sounds like. It's about the history of jewelry. And it's got some marvelous stuff that's all about that diamond necklace, which wasn't just a tiny little necklace. It sounds like it was practically, a waist to neck outfit made out of diamonds. So, yeah, there are all kinds of connections to that great book. Up next is, Sarah with the utterly lovely Honestly Elliot.
All right. So honestly, Elliot, I'm sorry that I don't have a copy, but I see that Nicole has one behind her. So maybe
yes, Nicole, show it.
So She can hold it up. I don't have a copy because all 3 copies that I have at my library are constantly checked out, because it has this appeal a little bit like Restart by Gordon Corman, like where it's, I call it like a gateway book. So for reluctant readers. So Elliot is a very likable kid. He has ADHD, and it comes out like for everyone that has ADHD as both a liability and a strength. He is, so right away I say that, and half the kids are like, oh, I have ADHD. So there's a lot of kids that can relate to that. And also he is trying to figure out living between 2 houses and so his parents are separate, they're divorced, and they are very different people. His mom is this sort of like creative, there's like plants everywhere, and she's like, oh yeah. And his dad was already a little uptight and has married this woman who basically has like sailboats like lined up in his room every 6 inches, and you can't have any dirt. So 2 super different houses. The place where Elliot really shines is in the kitchen. That is his happy place where he feels successful. And unfortunately, he really would like to use his dad's kitchen, which is like the dream kitchen, but he can't use it because he's messy. And so school is challenging because he's, constantly being told to like pay attention and do all this. But he gets this assignment and is paired to create a business with, so the assignment is for the kids to create a business, and he's paired with Maribel, who is kind of the polar opposite, seemingly, right? So she's the kid in the class that has like gel pens that match the section of her notebook, and, everything seemed to be just perfectly lined up. But it turns out that they actually are really great partners, and they start a business called, oh wait, I have visuals, but I'm not being shown, called Desperation Pie. And they work together to create this business, which is really successful here. And so another thing that I really appreciate this book, so right here I have, I did the last minute, so gluten-free flour, because Maribel has celiac. And this is something that isn't really represented in a lot of books, or when it's represented, it's often a way that's as like a family doesn't eat gluten in a sort of almost like demeaning or mockery way. And so I love that this is shown. And I think there are kids that really feel heard, whether it's like, celiac or food sensitivity, that kids that really have to live with these different ways of eating from other kids around them. And so they create this amazing business, Desperation Pie. And hold on, I have to look at my notes because I couldn't print them out. Anything else? So obviously one of the things, oh, and also just as a side note, Elliot's carries guinea pigs around, which is, just an added bonus. So in addition to baking, I even went and grabbed a pie plate. Looking at neurodiversity would be a great connection to this. There is a film, and I put it in the link. Hold on one second. I will get back to that. That called The Disruptors. And so that kind of showing that film and looking at that. And I know in my library, we do a like Celebrate Neurodiversity Month. So that would be another great connection. But this is a book that's going to appeal to lots of kids. So that's why I chose it.
Sarah, didn't that book have a recipe for Desperation Pie? Did you mention
that? There is also a recipe in it, yes. And I also put links in the handbook for other like gluten-free on a shoestring or other online places where you can find other gluten-free baking.
Oh, that's a great idea. But I just love the name Desperation Pie. Actually, most of my pies are sort of desperation pies, when you think about it. Courtney, is your camera on?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. All I see is a big
chat about cameras and spotlights, and hopefully that's getting sorted. So,
okay. So you're going to talk about, Rover's story.
Yeah,
The
so
rover and the most adorable drone ever.
Yay, thanks, Nicole. It's such a good list this year, right? And it was really hard to decide which book to talk about. But if you're looking for a book about a robot that makes you cry, this is the book for you, and cry in a good way. This will really appeal to kids who love The Wild Robot. I think this is a natural progression from that story. It's a book about a Mars rover named Resilience, or RES for short. Unlike other rovers, RES experiences human-like emotions: wonder, fear, appreciation, stubbornness. He loves music. He sings Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which is the cutest thing ever because he learned it from a scientist. And Rez is joined on his mission by a lovable and eager sidekick, a drone named Fly. And their mission is to explore Mars and find signs of water and life. In the guide, there's so many rich possibilities. You can do robotics, you can do coding. There's a 45-minute documentary from NASA about Mars rovers that would be a great thing for kiddos to watch. This book is also told through letters. One of the scientists, her daughter, writes letters to Rez. So that's the way the story progresses. So kids could write letters, experiment with telling a story through letters, write to a scientist. I also, for me, the most beautiful element of the book is the humanity and the exploration of what it means to be human. I think it's fascinating, and especially with all the AI shenanigans happening, I think that would be really ripe for discussion about what makes a being human or not human. You can look at parts of a rover, like on our handbook, there's, a diagram of a rover, which would be really fun for kids. You could make your own little robot. I just loved this book so much. I keep recommending it. It flies off the shelves. Every time I talk about it, my kid wants me to tell you that he also loved it. He's 11, so it has like a stamp of approval from a kid. So Jasmine Warga is the author, really lovely, really fantastic. I don't know if anybody else wants to add. I never fill up my whole 7 minutes of time. You're muted. Okay, Becky, you're muted. Do over.
Do over. I love this book. I thought it was, just heartwarming. But I was researching this after I read it and found out that the rover Curiosity, which is still tooling around on Mars, plays Happy Birthday to You every year on the birthday of its landing. And NASA will play this for you on their website, and you can listen to this little robot all by itself on Mars playing Happy Birthday to You. And
yes, please.
I thought about this with Rez.
One of the elements of the story is Rez is trying to figure out what a certain noise is. There's like a wind sound through the caves, and you can go again on the NASA website and like listen to recordings of this wind sound, which is really fun.
I never read the end of a book first, but I did flip to the last page of this book to make sure the last line wasn't "It's getting dark," because
I always read the end first.
Jasmine
Nicole.
Warga is such a good writer. She writes just such a nice variety of books, and she really brought a different voice to this book.
Yes, it's fabulous.
A very human robot.
All right. I'm Nick Westbaum. I'm coming to you from Montpelier, the Montpelier Kellogg Hubbard Library. I can present from the library because we're sadly closed to the public. We were flooded, and so nobody's in here right now. But soon we're going to hopefully reopen. I'm presenting today about a duet for home. which is a book that is about a set of characters that is living in a place where people have housing challenges, so they're temporarily unhoused. I'll start off by saying it's a great audiobook. I always love a book that has a great audiobook, so like I always want to put that plug in for those of you who like the audiobooks. I feel like this book is really important for having conversations about homelessness and about being unhoused, because it really presents a variety of characters. It kind of takes the stigma off of like kind of othering homelessness. And I think all of us can use reminders that homelessness doesn't look one way, you know, like we see so many portrayals of unhoused people and like this other idea. And so this book follows two characters, June, who is a preteen girl who's Chinese American, and Tyrell, who's a teenage boy. And so it goes from both of those perspectives, talking about their circumstances, their family, the challenges that put them where they're at. They both attend schools. They don't attend the same school. And they both have, you know, regular kid lives. And this is just an extra set of circumstances that they're having to deal with. So let's see, trying to look at my notes to make sure I don't miss anything I wanted to talk about. One of the things that I thought was most important in this book is the connections with things like finding something that you love, and like the emphasis on that. Like June is a musician and Tyrell is very fascinated with classical music and starts to become a musician himself. And they have this kind of persnickety teacher next door, Dominica, who who kind of against her will becomes June's teacher and then Tyrell's teacher. And she has this big dog Bartok who's who's always like storming around, and it's actually not her dog. Her roommate left the dog with her when he went to Europe. So it's got this great, fabulous cast of characters. It's also a really hopeful but realistic book. There aren't like happy endings tied up. I feel like it's a really important conversation for people who it's like to continue the conversation about how this isn't something that gets tied up in a neat bow at the end of a story. Like there's realistic ideas about affecting change and about ways that kids can have an impact on the world around them. And so that's some of the stuff that we, like I tried to emphasize in the handbook, is like thinking about how like homelessness is a real problem everywhere, including Vermont. And the idea of affecting real change and about, you know, making it local. Like I really feel like this book does a good job of feeling empowering, but not unrealistic. So that's part of the reason I wanted to talk a little bit more about it today. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Oh, a lot of music.
Yeah.
You know, in the handbook, you connected this to a lot of the musical selections that they talked about in the book.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great resource.
Yeah, the talking about classical music and like making it so, you know, a 15-year-old can pick up a classical instrument and start learning a classical instrument. You don't have to do it when you're starting when you're 3. You can love classical music and do it no matter what your background is.
Other connection, and also, can anyone see me? Because I can see me.
Yep.
Now,
no, I
because
can't.
I can see you.
So I think.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. I am also trying. I had the whole committee spotlighted, and so I stopped doing that. So hopefully that might help, at least for some folks.
Okay.
But when there's this many people on, sometimes Teams does weird stuff.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about is I know my school did a part of Spectrum Sleep Out through Spectrum Family Services, and this would be a great book. I'm sorry, you can't see me. There's nothing I can do. Just have to hear my voice like it's radio.
I'll hold the book up while you talk.
Thank you for the visual, Nicole. So I would really, if that was a great experience as a middle school, and Spectrum Family Services has a lot of resources on homelessness and people experiencing homelessness in Vermont, specifically youth. So that's a great resource and great opportunity to help some kids like bridge that disconnect between like us, them.
Mhm.
What? You see
Okay.
me, Amanda?
Now you're
That's
big.
really, I loved the
Okay,
element.
guys.
Oh,
So we're
can you
now
hear me?
ready, actually,
Wait,
for a
I think
second.
Courtney's saying one more thing. Courtney?
Oh, sorry, Courtney.
That's all right. I was just going to say, I also really loved the found family in this
Yeah.
story. Often the parents are gone. It's depressing, but they in this shelter had some real connection with other folks and kids and grown-ups, and I just thought that was so lovely to have that option for these kids.
Yeah, I agree. That was one of my favorite parts of the book as well.
Yeah. Lovely book. So we've got enough time to do a few more. It's really nice not doing that speed reading thing that we usually have to do. So let me see. I would like to talk about how to build a human. Let's see. Did that share? No.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
up.
I did.
I give up. Do we have a
No.
picture of?
No, we can see it.
Oh, fantastic. All right. How to Build a Human is a nonfiction science book by Pamela Turner. And it's clever, it's reader friendly, and what it talks about are the 7 steps that it takes to get from a primate ancestor to a human being. So each of the short chapters is titled things like "We stand up," "We smash rocks," "We get swelled heads," which does not mean we were becoming totally conceited. It's the development of the big human brain. "We take a hike," as people started migrating all over the globe. "We invent barbecue," cooking. "We start talking and never shut up." And she goes into genetically, why can we talk, but for example, chimpanzees, our closest primate ancestor, can't, which is actually fascinating. It all has to do with something called the FOXP2 gene. And we're just 2 amino acids different from chimps in this FOXP2 gene. It's probably a little more complicated than that, but that really struck me. And then the final chapter in How to Build a Human is we become storytellers. And there is so much stuff that you could do to accompany this this really fun read of a book. Her footnotes are funny. But for years, I guess it's 9 or 10 years now, I've been teaching history camp at various libraries, which actually started, Nick, when your Lennon was 4. But for a couple of years, every year history camp is different. But for a couple of years, we did the Stone Age as one of the days for the week-long history camp. So to accompany How to Build a Human, you could do a Stone Age workshop and come up with, do painted rocks. We ground our own paints from charcoal and from dried terracotta clay. Though I did find out later that it works a lot better if you cheat and you use powdered tempera paint. We made twig and pine needle brushes. We made bear claw necklaces out of air dry clay. We did cave paintings, which you can do if you get those giant cardboard boxes that refrigerators or washing machines come in. And you can actually go in there with a flashlight and markers and do your own decorated cave. We made atlatls and spears from dowel rods and paint stirrers, which didn't really work that well, but the kids loved it. And we made a model Stone Age axe, which involved tying a proper shaped rock onto a stick. We made model Stonehenges. So there's a lot of hands-on activity that can go with how to build a human at the same time that you're having a good time reading a really fun science book. So for science kids, they'll like it because it's got plenty of well-presented science. And for non-science kids, it's just a fun read. So I'd really recommend this one. Anybody else? Oh, come on, science.
It was super funny. I read it aloud with my 13-year-old, and like it's very engaging.
Okay. Sasha, do you want to do Manatee Summer? Do you want a picture of it?
I have it. I can hold it up. It's
Super.
right here. So I'm continuing on my cute sea creatures theme. This is Manatee Summer. This tells the story of a boy named Peter who lives in Florida. His mom is a real estate agent who's very busy, and during the summer he has plans to spend time with his best friend Tommy, and they are very into nature and everything outdoorsy. And his mom kind of lets him know that no, he can't spend his whole summer with his friend. He needs to take care of his grandfather who has Alzheimer's or dementia and has big time memory issues. So that kind of crushes his plans, but he still manages kind of to sneak out of the house to his favorite place, which is a canal near where they live. And his dream is to see a manatee. So every day they go out there and they look, and lo and behold, one day one shows up. And he keeps an eye on her for a little bit, and sometime later he finds that there's been an accident, and he's the manatee who he named Zoe has been hurt. So that just opens a whole can of worms and an adventure for Peter and his friends to help save Zoe, and a whole bunch of stuff happens. It's a very engaging story. So one of the things Peter and his best friend Tommy like to do, they have something called the Discovery Journal, which is like this big notebook that they share where they write down anything that they have encountered out in nature, critters, tree varieties, mushrooms, whatever. So I included a link to how to make this cute little paper bag Discovery Journal. It's super easy to do. All you need is some paper bags, twine, hole puncher. So mine just says Discovery Journal, and the cool thing is because it's paper bags, you have little pockets. So you can, mine's very basic, but you could poke another hole and put some more twine on it so that the items don't fall out, or a little bit of Velcro. And you can have the kids do whatever they'd like. I did a little acrostic poem on the first page of mine, and like a little thing where you could do a drawing or whatever you like. And it has a whole bunch of pockets and a lot of different opportunities of things you could do to make your own Discovery Journal. The other thing I found that was really helpful is that the Florida Wildlife Commission has a whole entire booklet about manatees that you can get online that has pretty much any activity you would ever want to do about manatees in it. Another thing I found that actually could link to otter too is that the National Park Service, they offer free virtual field trips with park rangers. You can schedule them from pretty much any of their national parks, and they will meet with your class. And if you have like a certain topic that you want to discuss, you can have a virtual visit with them, which is pretty cool. So that is basically Manatee Summer. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
I have a friend who is so into manatees, so she is getting this book for Christmas. And I thought I would accompany it with a handmade felt Christmas ornament of a manatee.
Oh, cute.
I'm having a hard time with this manatee because they're adorable animals, but if you try to translate them into felt, they kind of look like a blob.
Kind of a floating potato.
Yeah. Here, I just loaded the site for that great Florida wildlife teachers
Yeah.
resource. That was terrific.
Great. They do too, like
next.
magical mysteries too, like Belly Up and the Carl Hyacin books. I feel like it's fun.
Oh, you know, I wonder if he's ever seen Douglas Adams's book, Last Chance to See. Are any of you familiar with that? It was completely off the wall for Douglas Adams, but I could see Stuart Gibbs writing something of this type. It's all about traveling the world to see these animals that are on the edge of extinction and writing about his adventures and about the animals. And I thought, oh, and you know, one for kids would be just superb. Katie, want to do Victory Stand? Victory Stand.
Sure. This book enraged me because it was a story that I hadn't heard before now, and that was just sort of appalling to me. So we actually held off. This book is for older readers, and we thought that it might get picked up by the GMBA committee because it certainly has lasting appeal through high school, and I circulate it just to as many adults as I do to middle graders. But if you've had middle graders picking up March or Brown Girl Dreaming or any of those titles, this is one that is really gonna spark their curiosity. So this is the story of Dr. Tommy Smith, who grew up one of 14, son to a sharecropping family in rural Texas. He moved to California as part of the second wave of the Great Migration, and pretty quickly was recruited to sports teams. He began to get an education for the first time when he moved to California, and coaches quickly noticed that he was fast and athletically inclined. He was recruited to a really famous collegiate sports team called Speed City and had a really wonderful coach who really advocated for Black athletes, which was not the case at most colleges. A lot of colleges at the time would recruit Black athletes, but not provide them housing or basic services. So they lived in cars and barns and really struggled to survive. Another character that ended up on the Olympic podium alongside Dr. Smith was John Carlos. He came to the team from another college where the coach had suggested that he was fast due to his non-human skeleture. His previous coach had thought that Black athletes were somehow inhuman. So that gives you a picture as to what the expectation was of Black athletes joining these college teams. Dr. Tommy Smith lived through a lot of the really important moments of our civil rights movement. News moved slower at the time, so he wasn't always aware of what was happening across the country, which opens up a lot of dialogue with our classrooms about how our ability to share information, video, and photo can either help or hinder our social justice and racial justice movements. Tommy made it onto the college team, to the Olympic team. He was arguably the fastest man in the world. And he really had to decide whether he was even going to compete in the Olympics. Many of his fellow athletes opted not to because they did not want to be held up as a hero at the Olympics only to go home to poverty and racism. And so he decided that he would compete. And when this book kicks off, he's on the starting line of the most important race of his life. It's the race that could put him on the Olympic podium. He's injured, he's had death threats. Some of the other runners have had their pets killed, all kinds of pretty horrific things happen. Shoes stolen, anything that could be done to keep these athletes from competing. So you're here with him on the starting line. And you're really rooting for him to get to that Olympic podium because you know that iconic moment is coming. After Tommy took a stand on the Olympic podium, he was removed from the Olympic Games. His entire career was ended. He was not allowed to compete ever again, and his family was threatened. 50 years later, he has been inducted into the Olympic Hall of Fame. And it's very bittersweet because when I went looking to see how this event was reported in the news at the time, you can find current articles from, journalists at the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune that hold him up as an activist and hero, when at the time those same publications really were against his demonstration at the Olympic Games. It's really hard to access those articles without hitting a paywall, or they just haven't been digitized. So I was able to find some, but unfortunately, I think you'll find that many of the more positive spins are available online than those original negative articles, which is frustrating. I think that it's really opens up dialogue about the Colin Kaepernick demonstrations and gives a background to those occurrences. We're seeing more books published on the subject of Black athletes and the history of civil rights and why that platform, the athletic platform, was important. And it really, infuriated me that it hadn't come up when we saw Colin Kaepernick demonstrating on the fields, that it wasn't publicized or remembered at that time. There's all kinds of footage, both from the time and of Dr. Smith now, talking about his induction into the Hall of Fame. So it's pretty neat. There's a lot of video that you can watch, and it really opens the door to seeing how other Black athletes have faced discrimination and stood up for the civil rights movement.
Yes, swim team that's on our list this year too tackles some of the issues of racism, discrimination, and the trouble that Black swimmers had breaking into swimming as a professional sport. We've got just about 10 minutes, guys. 9 minutes. So Sarah, Different Kinds of Fruit, which was a book that really knocked my socks off.
I'm going to try to speed talk and make some connections because it sounds like there are people that want to hear about more books too. So Different Kinds of Fruit is a story. Hold on, my brain just glitched. I just want to refer to my notes. So Annabelle, I always forget the names. That's why I had to look. Annabelle lives in a small town in Washington State. She's been going to the same school since she was in kindergarten. It's this very small sort of alternative school, and she thinks this school year is going to be just like it's always been. But then a new kid steps in. So even though it's very different from the Next Great Polly Fink, which is incredibly, I adored that book, it has that part of like a new kid disrupting like what was a small town like status quo. And I think there are a lot of Vermont kids that can relate to that. Like I've been with this class since kindergarten and these same 15 kids, and it's just going to go. And then someone's like, guess what? I'm going to change it up. So Bailey's not the jokester that Polly Fink was, but so Bailey comes in. Bailey has lived with her family in Seattle and had a very like urban upbringing up till then. Bailey is fun and fashionable and is also non-binary. And that is like a part of their identity, but it's not like the whole part of their identity, which is also really important. And Annabelle finds herself drawn to Bailey and really interested in this urban life. And then also, or like just a different person came into this tiny town and wow, they like broke everything up and develops a crush also. But it's a lot about too. And then there is a twist. There's always those books that you can't tell, but there's a big twist that that unlocks something about Bailey's family that they had no idea about. But sometimes when you make a friend and that friend helps you learn not only about yourself, but also at this age about your family. And so it's an awesome book in so many ways, a quick read. I really like Kyle Lukoff. Kyle Lukoff is transgender, so it is very much an own voices book. And Kyle Lukoff also wrote another one, just as an FYI, that I loved called Too Bright to See. It didn't make it onto our list, but it did get some award. I just can't remember. You can throw it in the chat. And just to throw in, I'm speed talking that to get to some others, which Language of Seabirds, which is on our list, has, so if you're looking at not totally companion, but Language of Seabirds is also a kind of like first love, first crossed LGBTQ. So if kids are like exploring their gender and sexual identity, but they're not at like YA, like they're not 17 years old and having an intense romantic relationship, it's just a crush and you kind of want a quick kiss and you're thinking about that. Both those books are just, I feel like that was something that was missing from middle grade literature for a little bit. It just kind of skipped to YA. So I was thrilled to have 2 books on this year's list that kind of fills that gap. Yes, Newbery Honor book, yay.
All right.
Kyle Lukoff, he should come to Vermont. He'd be a great speaker.
Absolutely. Next,
He's
God.
also a fabulous picture book writer. He
Oh, yes,
writes really
thank you.
good picture books as well.
Yes, thanks.
Well, we don't have much time. I'm going to do 2 sentences on Attack of the Black Rectangles as we fly through here by A.S. King, just because book banning is such a huge issue for all libraries right now. So I thought it was a great read, and there are a lot of discussion possibilities tied up in this book with the teacher who is just bound to protect the children from anything that makes them uncomfortable. So a good read. But Courtney, how about Swallowtail Legacy?
Do we want to offer people an opportunity to ask questions? I just not to.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Wanted
We've
to check
only
in.
got a few minutes.
Yeah. So
who's up there? Do we have anything on the chat?
I don't think we've opened it. Just a quick.
I've got it. Would the National Archives have any of these original articles?
Yes.
This is for you, Katie, on Victory's Stand.
It's a good question. You know, I'm sure that they're accessible by someone with more savvy than I have. I did find you can go through some, I think it was it Life magazine you can go and
Yes.
yeah, and read. And it's, you know, just interesting to place what else is happening in the world because the entirety of that edition is available. So it puts it around, you know, it's pretty neat to do a timeline for this book and see what else was happening. South Africa had been banned from the games that year because of apartheid. There had just been glossed over, what's the word I want? In Mexico City, there had been an uprising and sort of a mass murder of demonstrators that was glossed over in order to host the Olympics there. So there's a lot of information to be accessed as to finding those sort of negative articles. I think if you don't mind paying for a Times subscription or you have access, I'd love to know. I'd love to see if someone can find them in the archives. I don't know.
Yeah, the Library of Congress might be the place to look too. Often the Library of Congress site has a lot of that sort of historical information.
And some libraries have access for their patrons to look at the Post, the Washington Post, or the New York Times. I just didn't want to put it as a link if it wasn't accessible to everyone.
Does anybody have any particular titles that you'd like to hear a couple of sentences about? So Courtney, do you want to do a really quick summation of Swallowtail Legacy, which I know is the sequel out yet?
Yes, the sequel is out. It's amazing. Book 3 is coming out in the spring. And these are great on audio. I listened to 1 and 2 on audio. Laura Karen Finch is one of my new favorite kids in literature. She's amazing. She's spunky. She's 12. She's part of a blended family. She loves soccer. She gets really mad all the time. So there's great, it's again, a very rich book. There's discussion of ornithology, maps, art restoration, family dynamics. So I know we have like 1 minute left, but it's just a really wonderful feel-good mystery. And I like it when kids can like get to the bottom of stuff that adults can't. I think that's really affirming for kiddos. So I will just say this is a great one of my favorites again on this year's list.
So
Katie
it looks
says-
like
Katie says Swallowtail Legacy has been flying off the shelf in Shelburne.
Very popular.
Fantastic. Anybody, you know, somebody mentioned the Clackety. Can't get my hands on it. How about the Clackety? It's scary. The kids I've seen have loved it.
Nicole, do you want to do like a 30-second summary? It sounds like some people are curious.
I
Well,
get
the
nervous
clackety.
speaking without notes, so I think I would say the wrong thing if I tried to do a 30-second speaking
Oh, that's
without
fine.
notes.
Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's
Oh,
okay.
no. Let me see if I've got anything. The description that the reviewers have been saying is it's like Coraline meets Alice in Wonderland. And the main character lives with her aunt in Blight Harbor, the 7th most haunted town in America. And there's an abandoned slaughterhouse, and there's the ghost of a serial killer, and there's a thing called a Clackety. I mean, how good can you get? And it's October, almost October.
Well, thank you all so much. I know it's hard to like get it all in an hour, but you did a fantastic job. And I know there might be there was a lingering question about a B list. Is there an available B list on the site or somewhere for this
There
year?
isn't one on the site yet, but we'll all talk about it. I'm sure we could put one together. A number of people talked to me about they wish that the B list was still up and going. And we had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will put you can put it up on the site,
Yep.
which is fantastic. As you can see, there's already a lot of good stuff there. It was just going to continue to add to it. There are also, like, for people who would like things added to the website, you can let the committee know or let me know if there are some resources that you'd like to add to those books. So we want to thank everybody for coming. We do have to get going. Our next the author for Red Clover is going to be checking in here in a few minutes. So we appreciate you all coming. And there is just a survey if you take a minute to fill that out, and there will be a follow-up sent to anyone who's registered as well. The stewards keynote and the committee presentation are recorded and will be available and shared out probably sometime next week. So thank you to everyone for joining us. We do ask that if you'll leave the meeting so that we can coordinate with the keynote and the committee for Red Clover. But you please rejoin us at 3 o'clock for the Red Clover conference. And thanks so much to the committee and everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, and everybody. Thanks a million. Bye, guys.
All right. Josh, did you stop the recording?
Here we go.